Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday morning, September the 20th. It continues to look like there will be a storm system that forms off the southeast U.S. coastline at the end of the week and then slides up along the eastern seaboard during the early part of the upcoming weekend, likely producing a rainy and windy day for at least parts of the mid-Atlantic region, down to the Carolinas as well. There will be a strong onshore flow of air that develops as a result of a tightening pressure gradient between this intensifying low pressure system to the south and strong high pressure to the north. Winds could potentially gust past 40 miles per hour, for example, at the coastline of New Jersey, Delmarva Peninsula, down in southeastern Virginia, the Carolinas, again with an intensifying pressure gradient between this system to the south, a low pressure system to the south, and high pressure to the north. The low pressure area will stay out over the open waters of the still very warm southwestern Atlantic, likely take on some tropical characteristics. By that I mean kind of develops into a warm core type of system. Very well could become a named tropical system. I think the next one on the list would be the O storm, Ophelia. After that comes Philip. Whether or not it becomes a named tropical storm, even an outside chance at a hurricane, it could very well end up producing a rainy and windy type of day on Saturday in much of the mid-Atlantic region, and again down to the Carolinas, and ultimately some rainfall all the way up into New England. Let's start off here by taking a look at the latest outlook by the NOAA's National Hurricane Center for the next several days. We have a few different systems to monitor in the near term here, and ultimately in the longer term as well. First of all, Hurricane Nigel continues to exist right over the central Atlantic. In fact, its winds have increased, now maximum sustained winds up to 100 miles per hour or so. No threat at all to the U.S. It looks like it moves northeast direction over the next few days out over the colder and colder waters of the North Atlantic. It could ultimately have an impact all the way to Iceland to the north, Portugal, Spain to the south and east over the next several days in a weekend stay. But again, no threat at all to the U.S. Meanwhile, a new tropical system has just exited off the west coast of Africa. This is the west coast of Africa right here. It looks like it will move in a general west to northwest direction over the next several days. It could very well be a threat somewhere in the eastern U.S. Down the road here, maybe let's say the early part of October. In the short term, this is the area of interest. Low pressure is very likely to form just off the southeast U.S. coastline at the end of the week here, going into the upcoming weekend. Probably stays out over the open waters of the warm southwestern Atlantic for several hours, taking on tropical characteristics, then moves in a general northward direction right over or right near the U.S. East Coast. Could very well become a named tropical system, tropical storm, perhaps an outside chance at reaching a hurricane status as well. But whether or not it's actually named a tropical system could end up producing a rainy and windy day across much of the mid-Atlantic by the time we get to the first half of the upcoming weekend. Well, I wanted to start off here with a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies. Then we'll take a look at the GFS model. By the way, the the computer forecast models, have a wide variation of solutions for this potential tropical system. The Canadian model has been the most aggressive with the strongest system, the most widespread soaking rain event on Saturday, whereas the European model, a little bit of a weaker system, more to the east, mainly impacting coastal sections. GFS is somewhere in the middle, and that could end up being the proper solution here. Still a lot to be determined. We have 2 or 3 days before this event, so certainly stay tuned to arcfieldweather.com over the next few days. Now, let's take a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies. First of all, you notice an area of colder than normal sea surface temperatures. This is as a result of the passage of first Hurricane Franklin and then Hurricane Lee. Hurricanes traveling over the open waters of the ocean oftentimes will churn up the waters and bring up to the surface colder waters from underneath. That's a process we call upwelling, and we've talked about this before, that general idea, or the role of hurricanes in Mother Nature, is to help to balance things out, to try to transport heat from the tropics all the way up into the mid latitudes or even the high latitudes. This is another way that nature tends to balance things out. This was much warmer than normal water right here in the western part of the Atlantic Ocean until the passage of these hurricanes. I had a professor back at Penn State back in the late 70s, early 80s, a great professor named John Dutton. He had a textbook called The Ceaseless Wind. Short title, but kind of profound in it. What it suggests is that nature is always trying to balance itself out, but really can never achieve that, hence the ceaseless wind. Well, this is a balancing act here by these hurricanes, Franklin and Lee. Brought up the colder waters from underneath to the sea surface, and at least for several days, it'll remain colder than normal out in that part of the Atlantic Ocean. Meanwhile, in the southwestern Atlantic, tucked in right off the U.S. southeast coastline, still warmer than normal water. This is around 30 degrees Celsius out here, whereas this now colder than normal water has dropped down to about 25 degrees Celsius. This is certainly sufficiently warm to support a tropical storm formation, and that is indeed where this low pressure area is likely to form by later Friday night, going into the day on Saturday, and then again it ultimately moves northward up along the Atlantic seaboard. Well, again, let's take a look at the GFS model. This is the conventional GFS model from 0Z last night, kind of in the middle of the three computer forecast models, the Canadian and the European, in terms of this upcoming weekend event. It's somewhere in the middle. Again, the Canadian has been the strongest, produced the strongest storm, the most widespread soaking rain event, whereas the Euro is a weaker system with less of a soaking rain event. First of all, the key player, the strong upper level ridge over Canada here, that'll kind of slowly slide to the east over the next couple of days. And here's a reflection at 500 millibars of an upper level trough, and that is what heads to the south and east. In fact, let's move forward here, and here we have that upper level trough sitting right over the southeast U.S. by tomorrow morning. And this is where the low pressure area will start to form during the day on Thursday, going into the day on Friday. Notice a lot of orange over Canada here. That's high pressure ridging up across much of Canada. And here is the upper level trough, and that's the location for the development of this low pressure system at the end of the week here. Then we move forward here into Friday, and finally into the day on a Saturday morning here. Now notice a couple of big features there. We continue to have high pressure ridging to the north and west of this particular system. Again, it may be a tropical storm at this time, and upper level ridging not quite as strong as over Canada, but nonetheless upper level ridging over the central part of the Atlantic Ocean. In other words, it kind of leaves a path here right along this area right here for this system to kind of squeeze through those upper level ridges over the next several days. So again, it could very well push slowly to the north and then ultimately to the northeast off the New England coastline by the latter part of the upcoming week. You notice a lot of lows and highs here, by the way, across the North America here. All the blues represent below normal heights, and all the oranges or reds above normal heights. We've had a very, what I call a blocky pattern, blocking type of pattern with lots of upper level lows and lots of upper level highs. It tends to lead to very slow moving systems at the surface, and that's one of the main reasons why we've had some of these extreme rain events, for example, in Greece a couple of weeks ago, and Libya more recently, where you get underneath an upper level trough in this kind of a blocking pattern. You can be stuck for several days and get heavy rain events. If you happen to be lucky and stuck under an upper level ridge, you might have very nice weather for several days, or hot and dry weather for several days. In fact, the Mid-Atlantic region has been enjoying a pretty extended period here, except for the latter part of Sunday night, enjoying basically rain-free and fall-like temperature pattern here. But again, a lot of highs and lows here, and that will help to produce a slow motion for this particular storm system, and its only path for an exit may be between these ridges here. Let's go out a little farther in time, and here we go. Still along the eastern seaboard by the time we get to Sunday, and a strengthening ridge to its east, a strong ridge to its north and west. And again, this is pretty much the only path for this system to go up along the east coast and then slowly turn to the north and east by the end of the upcoming weekend. And here we go by Monday morning. Here is what remains of this system here over, once again, the Canadian Maritime provinces, with very strong ridging to the west and to the east here. And again, a blocking type of pattern. This is what we call an omega type of blocking pattern here, where the upper level wind flow kind of resembles the Greek letter omega. It's a very slow moving pattern with these surface systems with strong high pressure may remain under it for several days, and strong low pressure may remain under that for several days in this omega blocking type of pattern. And if this continues into the weekend, which is certainly into the winter, which is certainly on the table, you could have some very excessive snowfall associated with some snowstorms here if we continue to have a blocking type of pattern and sustained Arctic air outbreaks. More on that over the next several weeks. Well, let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps from last night's conventional run of the GFS. High pressure in control over the Mid-Atlantic region. Continuation, some very nice weather. Places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, all the way through much of the day on Friday. It stays rain-free and fall-like temperatures. Now, a little bit of rain here off the Florida coastline as we begin the day on Wednesday, but notice an area out here over the south central U.S. That is where that upper level feature exists this morning. It slides to the southeast U.S. by tomorrow morning, and here is a reflection of rainfall developing. Low pressure areas starting to form here, at least the beginning signs later tomorrow into tomorrow night. Still have high pressure to the north here, pretty strong high too, by the way, 1027 millibar high to the north, and that will play an important role because the difference between the strong high to the north and the intensifying low to the south will tighten this pressure gradient between these two systems, and that will result in a persistent and becoming strong onshore flow of air. The winds blow clockwise around highs, and they blow counterclockwise around lows, and this is setting up for a persistent onshore flow here that could ultimately reach 40 plus miles per hour at coastal sections, New Jersey, Delmarva, down to southeastern Virginia, and even into the Carolinas. Now, let's move forward a little bit. Again, this low pressure area stays out over the waters, the warm waters of the southwestern Atlantic for several hours, may cause it to develop tropical characteristics, become a warm core system, ultimately may be named as a tropical storm, which would be Ophelia, and then slowly pushes to the north. And again, a 1004 millibar low and a 1030 millibar high causes this onshore flow to intensify. Winds will be out of the east or northeast, let's say, on Saturday, places like New York City, Philadelphia, Atlantic City, all the way down to D.C. And here we go. The GFS pushes it northward, and the rainfall extends to the I-95 corridor, certainly by the time we get to Saturday on this particular model run with this particular model. And a lot of strong winds associated with, again, what could be a named tropical system at this time. It then moves northward right over the Chesapeake Bay area by late Saturday night. Onshore flow of air continues, and with that persistent long-term onshore flow of air, watch out for the threat of coastal flooding. New Jersey, Delmarva Peninsula, early part of the upcoming weekend. And here we go all the way into late Saturday and Saturday night time frame. Even some heavy rain depicted here on the 0Z run of the GFS over that D.C. to Philadelphia to New York City corridor as late as Saturday night. And then that system, again, we talked about its path just off the New England coastline. It's really its only path to exit between the strong ridge to the north and west and another strong ridge to the south and east. is in this direction here by the time we get to the latter part of the upcoming weekend, again, moving ultimately over the Canadian Maritime provinces, which of course experienced Hurricane Lee during the past weekend. So certainly stay tuned to arcfieldweather.com for updates on this developing situation. I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.